I did is, after I found all these titles, and I'll talk a little bit about how I chose the titles, but I just want to talk about the process first, is that I read the titles into the computer, because I love my computer. Thank you, Lisa. And then what I did is I used the computer to help me break apart each individual letter from the word itself, from the actual sound itself. And I put an example on the piece to the right over here. It's called Zebra with a Sunburn, because what's black and white and red all over? Well, not that painting, because it has none of those. Zebra with a Sunburn, you can kind of see the frequency graph that I use. It's a visual graph, and I use that in conjunction with the audio. So I was able to, it would be very annoying if you were over my shoulder, but I was able to really try to figure out where the letter Z from zebra, when I speak zebra, where does the Z start and stop? Where does the E start and stop? And try to actually break things up. Obviously, starting with the spaces or the pauses was the first place I would do it, and then work my way through. There were some issues with those annoying TH sounds, or those damn letters that we have in English that have no business actually being in English. Double letters, what is stupid? And, you know, okay, but so those are some of the areas that I had some artistic, you know, play. But for the most part, I tried to stay true to the form and actually cut it up using just the sound. And then using that map, the image map, which we have some examples of, I then was able to actually use that width to actually replicate, I was hoping, my voice, much like a musician would use, you know, Sibelius, a way of producing like sheet music to actually get across their ideas. So I had 3 axes to work with, 3 variables, and I used all 3 to produce this body of work. The content of the work was probably the most fun. I really tried really hard to research what people had done before. Kind of came up with 3 groupings of how artists use text in art, because that's all we're seeing. If we saw Helvetica, you'd probably walk in and say, more text on art, you know, whatever. So, you know, instead of this font. And that's, I'm hoping that draws you in a little bit, but at the same time, I kind of thought, okay, 3 groupings. One of the groupings seemed to be direct description of what we're seeing, right? Most curators, most, you know, gallery directors tell me what's the title so that I can put it on my ledger and then put the sold next to it. And so it's usually a descriptor. It's like, you know, unless it's untitled number 42 or something. It's usually something that's describing the work that we're seeing. And I thought it would be interesting to actually do a lot of those for the show. So Umbrella on a Windy Beach was one of the pieces that I thought was, you know, it's a beautiful description of what's going on. And then you look at the painting and you're like, I don't see that. But that's what it is. Like, American flag, right? It's like, that's the American flag? No, I don't think so, but that's what it is, because it's the text. That's the power of the text. Another element, or another group of like things that I was playing with was the impossibility. Like, a picture is worth 1,000 words. Well, use one word like infinity and go for it. Try to paint that. It's just really hard. So the second category was things that you can't possibly do except through language. So, I mean, I love the 3 chairs. And so the idea of like taking like every picture of a chair and actually rendering that as a painting. I thought it'd be great. It's like, I've just painted every picture of a chair. Ever, right? I didn't put ever, but like, I'm emphasizing that. So that would probably be good. So like, I thought that would be kind of fun to actually use text and then introduce impossibilities into a visual representation. And this way you can still say, you know, hey, on my wall I have a painting that shows every picture of a chair. Okay, and the third one was the one that was like those pithy slogans that artists come up with, like art is art, is art is art, is art is art is art. And I found, well, I did a lot of those because I think they're cool, but I also felt like I kind of found a pattern. I found that tautologies seem to be like the way to go if you want to be deep. Right? So like saying nothing but using words to do it, and very short amount of them so that people don't have to pay attention too long, that seems to be like philosophy for artists. So I used a lot of those kind of pithy quotes and tautologies, aphorisms that I developed that I thought were fun, and so that was like the third body, these brilliant things like the definition of art is art. Whatever. That's saying nothing really long. Right? Anyway, so those were some of the ways I picked the titles for the work. And
Chris,
yes,
turn around a little bit too. There's more people than us. Like,
Try a different come on there.
There
Chris.
you go. Like, just like, no, you don't have to move back, but just like every now and then, like turn around a little bit. He'll come back, don't worry.
Anyway, the reason I think I'm at the end of my talk, but I definitely want to open it up to questions. I don't think I have much left to say that's not on my sheet of paper or not on the wall. But I am really interested in, how you see the work. Is it derivative? Did you see it as stripe painting right away, or is it interesting that it's meaningful with text? Did you try to decipher it? I'm really curious as an artist how you as an audience and as friends and as people that have come to the opening because it's cold outside see the work. So if there are questions, I'd love to take those now. Okay.
I have a question about the alphabet and the assigning of letters. I know on some of your earlier stuff you had messages interspersed in some of your paintings. Has your alphabet changed? Because with this, because you've evolved so much now with these, are the same colors assigned to same letters, or is there new interpretation?
It's a good question. I've tried to keep consistent, so if you have the card, you've probably been reading my jacket right now, and it's fairly consistent. What I did is develop like a color wheel for the alphabet, because that's how they should teach kids in school. There's a color wheel on the alphabet, so you don't sing that annoying song anymore. And this way, every letter has equal weight and is loved just as equally, and not the Z is always at the end. But no, I haven't changed the colors, just based on the idea that, there was no real need to. And I think I'm at the end of it, but the nice thing is I put so many things into place with the colors that I have, is that I really want to make it accessible to to people to be able to work with it.
I know she had a question, but it struck me, rather than just saying stripes, it almost looked like UPC symbols could evolve into something like this, where people could actually scan messages using the color alphabet that you sort of created. So
that makes great. The problem with, so we're getting to that point where, besides being male being a problem, sorry guys, but not only is male a problem, but the way colors work next to each other, most artists kind of know this, but when you take a color that's a color, for real color, like a real thing, and you put it next to another real thing color, that changes this color in our brains. So it's really hard with the color alphabet to do something like a barcode scanning or those kinds of things. Another problem is this beautiful illumination. If we were in the 1900s, one of the reasons they didn't come up with probably a color alphabet was at night, we were under this burning yellow thing lamp, and all these pieces would look like boring black and white striped work. So there is that issue. Another issue is that probably before the last 10 years, printers, if you guys have printed anybody older than, anybody as old as me, but even anybody older than 30, knows that if you printed something on an inkjet printer and you had it 10 years and you look at it, Good luck. I mean, colors tend to move. They tend to shift. They tend to bleed. They tend to fade. And it would be terrible if the letter B over time turned into the letter O or W. So, you know, that's another issue with color alphabet. We're better now. We're using solid pigments for the work, and I'm hoping that you can still read this work in 100 years when America is no longer. But anyway.
You just touched on the widths. You were talking about the widths and
Yeah.
how you arrived at that. Did you take your voice and digitize it or something, and then look at the length?
Yeah, there are some examples I put here. And there's a really good example with the zebra with the sunbird, but you guys are more than happy. This is an amplitude graph. Amplitude doesn't show you a lot, as the musicians in here kind of know. Amplitude just shows you how loud or soft I was talking. But in order to actually really see the actual words, you have to look at the frequency, which I put an example of on the side there. So I did use those to, and you can physically see this was actually used, and it's all yucky with like wax and stuff. And this is what I used to actually create the word. So, yes?
When you talk about this as being a form of language, I mean, obviously you've worked with this the most. Is it get to a point where you can read it without a translation grid?
I can't, that's a good question, whether I can read this really well. Obviously not, I had 3 pieces upside down today. But one of the things that I can do is decipher it letter by letter. When we read, we don't read from left to right, we jump from word to word. And sometimes we jump whole words. So reading is a really intricate, interesting thing that we do that's not so linear. And so I cannot yet read these paintings as if I were reading anything. But I can decipher them fairly easily. I'll know what's an S, what's an R, what's an E, with no problems, but I cannot read it yet. So good question. Yeah.
I know that you talked about with the most frequently used letters doing primary or secondary colors, but was there any emotional I mean, I guess I can think of some colors being more warm or some colors
That's a great
being
question.
cooler.
Good
Were things
question.
like that, did they come into play or was it just more random?
Yeah.
How often they were used?
It's a good question. A lot of artists, and I read a lot of the work by Kandinsky and obviously Goethe. A lot of people have theories on color. Kandinsky tried to use an emotional language based on color, and so he tried to codify emotion with color. I wanted to keep it legible. So I really took the way I used my eyes, like a scientist would use their eyes, to try to figure out if I can see it really well, if I could discriminate between an orange and like an orange yellow and a bright yellow and a light yellow, then I can discriminate pretty easily, and I would try to use that set. You'll see that there are colors that it's hard to discriminate, so I use